About 8 years ago, I was at this bar that I hosted karaoke at every Wednesday night. I had only just picked up this gig about 2 weeks prior, and both of those Wednesday nights had been really slow, which had an effect on the amount I was paid. My gig typically started at 9, so I would try to get there around 8:30, but on this particular evening, I had arrived unusually early, around 7 p.m. I had become pretty good friends with a bartender, and she had mentioned to me that there was always a small crowd left over from daytime when she began her shift at 6. They would stick around until around 8, so I thought I could encourage some of the early evening stragglers to stay for the show if I got there a bit early. Anyway, my effort was to no avail, as there were only about 5 people in the bar, including the bartender. I was disappointed, but had a small following from my other gigs, and I was expecting some of them to show up a little later, so I wasn't worried yet. The night was young, and I was happy to see my favorite bartender. When I walked in, I set my equipment down on the stage. I gave her a smile and a what's up nod from across the nearly desolate bar. I waited for the warm smile and welcoming greeting that my friend usually extended me when I came, but what I got was much less enthusiastic. She just raised her eyebrows and pressed her lips together tightly, attempting to force a smile which seemed to make her lips disappear, making her mouth look like a thin, straight line, almost like it was drawn on. It was unusually out of character, but I assumed it was due to the lack of business. Slow nights were no good for us, or the bar. If a night starts out slow with low energy, it's hard to get it going. People don't like walking into an empty, quiet bar. It's uncomfortable, other than obviously looking like a bore fest, and individuals that do come in don't tend to stay long unless they are the type that bring the party with them. Especially on nights like this. That's what you end up hoping for, that you can bring something to the atmosphere. Assuming their energy is good and infectious, a crowd can grow from there. In a similar way, bad energy can destroy the atmosphere and thin a crowd out quickly. For some reason, bad energy seems far more infectious and tends to linger for much longer. Just think about the last time you were in a social setting that was familiar to you and the others around you, such as a dive bar with regulars, and you had a pretty good time. The music was good, people were singing, dancing, maybe there was someone buying rounds, telling jokes, engaging those surrounding them. Then, compare that to the same setting, only this time some jerk comes in and starts a fight. When a fight ensues, it is rarely contained between its instigators. It will likely spread like wildfire, involving the people nearest to it first, as it draws a spectacle of more people, who are then likely to jump in, and so on, until the blaze is eventually snuffed out. But the aggression is still present at this point, and extremely volatile. Everyone has likely been drinking alcohol. The atmosphere is saturated with acceleration, and now an array of highly flammable components is all in dangerously close quarters, like a tinderbox, waiting for the smallest reason to ignite. I went on ahead and started setting up so I could put some music on. I could hear bits and pieces of the conversations happening up at the bar without being able to discern anything in particular. Yet still the lull of voices seemed to be filled with tension, with one of the voices occasionally rising above the rest. I could make out certain flint phrases, which is a term I've given to recognizably aggressive or shit-starting language that when struck wrong would do exactly that. However, I wasn't too concerned because I could hear a scattering of friendly laughter. It was a man's voice, one I didn't recognize, but it wasn't odd since I wasn't familiar with everyone at that bar yet. I did notice that he didn't seem to be familiar to anyone else though, as he appeared to be alone, casually ricocheting between one conversation and another, like he was waiting for someone to invite him over for a drink. Unfortunately, no one was taking the hint. He seemed to get louder, sounding more and more agitated. Music can often soothe a restless soul, a nicer way of saying that it can distract a drunk or defensive person. The trick is reading the individual if you don't already know them. Then, choose the perfect song, one that's quickly and easily recognized, and it will engage the person without triggering any negative feelings. I took this guy for a good old Skinnerd boy at heart, one who was craving a little attention, desperately wanting someone to connect with. Nobody can fill a wayward heart better than Mama, so Simple Man was the song I chose. The song has a very recognizable guitar intro that has a good feel in general, and to those who know it, it's nostalgia-inducing. Once the song has its listener regressed into a fledgling state, it offers the insight of a trusted matriarch, gently urging an oath towards simple, yet important virtues, ultimately reminding the listener that the responsibility of having good character is an expectation that comes from the heart of their existence, and nobody wants to disappoint Mama. I watched the man carefully, waiting for a moment between his attempts to engage the others, while he was completely disconnected. I wanted the song to embrace him suddenly in a moment of desolation, so I could implant the feeling of wistfulness and expectation I was aiming for. Then, as others would naturally chime in as the lyrics began, a united association, or a faux kinship, would be ignited, cohesively bringing the small crowd together in a moment of solidarity that could then be easily maintained by myself and the bartender for the duration of the night. That was the idea anyway, and initially, it seemed to work. At first, it seemed to play out like I'd envisioned. As the music began, the man spontaneously transformed from a lonely drifter into an avid Skinnerd fan, busting out the air guitar as the song went on. The others indicated their shared affinity for the song through various approving sounds and gestures. As the lyrics began, they all joined in unmanaged unison, with the man with the invisible guitar and loudest voice leading the chorus. Feeling quite satisfied with the success of my efforts, I approached the bar, and my dear friend finally gave me the generous greeting I had missed. She smiled at me as the look of relief washed over her face. She then mouthed a simple, "Thank you," then shook her head in amusement at the band of merry fools suddenly joined like lifelong comrades and their inability to carry a single tune among the four of them. She asked if I wanted a drink, and I said out loud that I wanted to buy a round for the new house band, but only if it wouldn't incapacitate them or prevent them from performing. They all laughed and thanked me. The song ended, and the next song in the playlist began. All Right Now by Free. A little something extra I put in place for the new guitar hero, which, just as I expected, he took to right away. My friend had already started lining up the round I'd ordered without having to ask. 2 buds, 1 Corona for the 3 regulars, a shot of Makers for the old-timer at the end of the bar, a shot of Tuaca, and a DP for me. "You know what? Might as well make it 2 Tuacas. You're shooting it with me," I said to my bartending friend. She replied, "All right, if you insist." Then she looked at the guitar hero, who was over there killing it in true Paul Rogers style. "Hey Rockstar, pick your poison. The DJ here bought a round. Did you just want another natty, or did you want a shot?" The guy had previously had one of each, so she wasn't sure what he'd want. He walked up to the bar, but instead of addressing the bartender, he looked at me and said, "I got money. I may have just got out, but I got me some money." Then he mumbled something I couldn't make out, and I said, "I'm sorry, And before I could finish, he interrupted with, What are you sorry for? I continued, slightly confused, but meaning to get to the point. I was just buying around for the bar. That's you too, bud. What's your name? You want to do a shot with us? I gestured towards the 2 shots of Tuaca sitting on the bar. The man reached over and picked up one of the shots and said, "My name isn't Bud," then threw the shot back, making a face of disgust before firmly slamming the shot glass on the bar. Then he continued, "That shit wasn't Jack Daniels, and I don't need no woman buying me shots." He paused and looked at the bartender. "Give me another beer, and 2 Jacks. Make them double. Put them on my tab." She placed his order on the bar, and he slid one of the shots over to me. "Now, this is a shot. You can call me Crow." It had been a long time since I had had Jack Daniels, mostly because I wasn't much of a heavy drinker, partially because Jack Daniels tended to cause me lapses in my better judgment. "Whoa, thank you, Crow, but I've got to host karaoke all night starting at 9, and I don't need to be shit-faced before I even get started." Crow wasn't accepting excuses, and I was trying my best to keep the mood light. He said, "I know you prefer them. I can tell, but you don't have to be a pussy. In fact, you shouldn't show a man like me any weakness if you can avoid it. That's good advice. You can do it. Just take the fucking shot. Don't be rude." I knocked the shot into the back of my throat and swallowed hard, successfully foiling my reflex to cough. My eyes began to sting as that sour mash burned its way through my chest all the way down to my stomach. Crow was right. I do generally prefer women, and it is obvious to most. However, what is not obvious is that it isn't the exacting standard that everybody thinks it is. It just tends to work out that way most of the time. In any case, it's not something that I consciously carry around with me like some kind of creed. I don't even really think about it until someone brings it up, which usually makes me feel like I've been reassigned into a different category, based off of one of my most trivial features. That bothers me, because I feel like by making me this one thing that doesn't even relate to us, they are selling us both short. I don't have the ability of summing someone up that quickly, as people tend to be such sordid things. Here, I was trying to make this guy feel included, and he was putting me in the defective bin. My inner monologue began to reflect the effects of the bourbon. What did he mean I shouldn't show him weakness? I didn't, and I'm not. And who does he think he is? I'm not scared of him, and why does he have to be so aggressive anyway? Maybe it's because he just got out of what I assume was prison, and is still used to thinking he has to intimidate to protect himself or gain respect. Now this is a line of thinking I can usually avoid with good judgment, but the Jack Daniels had just burned its way through that, allowing me to make stupid assessments like this. Number 1, he looks fairly young. He just wants attention because he's insecure, not dangerous. Number 2, whatever landed him in prison must not have been too serious, or they wouldn't have let him out. Number 3, he isn't used to being around normal thinking people, and he's a little jaded. Just needs someone to show him positive reinforcement. Number 4, he's expecting me to be dismissive and treat him differently for being an ex-con just as he thinks he has no use for me because we won't be hooking up. And of course, the worst conclusion to my alcohol-saturated reasoning. Number 5, I should give him my unfettered trust to prove him wrong. Well, thanks for the shot, Crow. It's nice to meet you. I'm Boo, by the way. I extended my hand to shake his. His hand was enormous and devoured mine, almost crushing it to dust when he squeezed. Boo? Who are you trying to scare? You ain't scary. You're soft and breakable. He finally released the grip on my hand, and it fell limp. I tried shaking some blood back to my fingers, and I could feel my pulse beating at the center of my hand. Shit, that hurt. Why did you have to squeeze so hard with your big old Sasquatch hands? I gave a little laugh at the end to let him know I was okay. I decided I was going to go out back and smoke, so I started to walk off, and Crow took it as a response to his Frankenstein handshake and got pretty upset. So you're just gonna blow me off and walk away because I squeezed your hand too hard? I thought we were going to be friends. I didn't squeeze you that hard. I wasn't trying to hurt you. You'll know when... I interrupted. I'm not blowing you off, silly man. I'm going out back to smoke. I've got a joint in my pocket that's calling my name. You're welcome to join me if you like, and grab my DP for me while you're at it. Now, clear-minded me would have seen his response to me walking off as an enormously suspicious overreaction and obvious red flag, indicating a dangerous level of emotional instability, worthy of caution. But nope, not this night. This was the one night in my life when caution can end up being the difference between life and death. I would soon learn the sobering reality of my mistake. Crow followed behind me, carrying my DP and his beer out to the back of the bar. I had parked my car right outside the back door so I could bring my equipment in, and I told Crow that he could set our drinks down on my hood. I lit the joint and started to hand it to Crow when it dawned on me that he might be under some sort of parole restrictions and not allowed to partake, so I asked him if that was the case. He responded, "Give me that thing. I don't gotta piss for no one but myself. Besides, I didn't go in on any drug charge." I handed him the joint and wondered what he did go in on since drugs were my assumption. He passed the joint back to me after sucking half of it down in one hit, blowing out a cloud of smoke that could have gotten any bystander within 10 feet high as a kite, and he didn't even cough. I decided to take one more hit and give him the rest. I was pretty buzzed. It got quiet for a moment, and my mind started to reflect on some of the things he had said. What had he mumbled under his breath earlier? I forgot to ask him. What was that whole soft and breakable shit about? Did he start to say that I'd know when he was trying to hurt me, and not if he was trying to hurt me? And what was he in prison for if not drugs? I handed him the joint and told him he could keep it, and I lit a cigarette. "You know them things will kill you," he said, and I parried his cliche with another. "Well, if it ain't one thing that'll kill me, it'll be another." He chuckled, and I asked him what was so funny, and his answer kind of made the hair on my neck stand up. "Yeah, maybe someone will kill you." Then he went on to another subject, which, at this point, I wasn't sure I wanted to take on. "Aren't you going to ask me what I was in for?" I responded, "No, that would be rude. I was just going to wonder about it." Then he pulled out his own cigarettes and asked me for a light. He had been leaning on my car this whole time, and I was leaning on the building next to the door, and it was pretty dark. There were no lights on out back because it would draw all the insects to where we were standing, so the only light came from the street light on the edge of the parking lot, making him less visible to me than I was to him, until he stood straight up and took a couple steps towards me into the light so he could reach the lighter as I handed it to him. The flame illuminated him just enough for me to see his face, and it reminded me of how much of a stranger he was to me. As I studied his dark features, I wondered if he was just a dangerous man, or like I had originally thought, another lost soul in need of a friend, but unequipped with the social skills to be given a solid chance. "Boo," he said, all of a sudden, which kind of startled me out of my thoughts. "Why they call you Boo? You ain't scary. Hell, you wouldn't know what scary was if it was standing right in front of you." I tried to ignore the obvious hints of irony that were beginning to dawn. "It's just what I've always been called since I was a baby. My name is Cindy, or Cindy Boo if you like." Then he said, "Bet you can't guess why they call me Crow." I answered, "Let's see, because you never forget a face?" "No, It's short for crowbar. Where did you come up with a never forget a face deal? He questioned. I replied, yeah, they say crows are really smart and super social. They can recognize a human face for a long time and associate it with good or bad, so they can alert the other crows in the murder of danger if they need to. In the murder? He grinned curiously. That's what a group of crows is called. Grammatically, you would say a murder of crows like you would say a herd of buffalo or a gaggle of geese, I replied. I'd just call them a bunch of fucking birds, Crow said, and I laughed. That works too, and looked down at my feet. Suddenly, Crow's tone changed. So, where do the crows go at night? His voice sounded eerily deeper, almost unnaturally deep, and I quickly looked up from the ground and found that he was about 3 steps closer to me than he had been moments earlier, and was now a bit too close for comfort, but I couldn't back up. I was already against the wall. Also, unsettling was the fact that he was now grinning this abnormally wide grin. The bill of his baseball cap covered his eyes, so I couldn't tell what his point of focus was, but I imagined that he was staring at me like I was his prey. I wondered if I could get away with sidestepping myself around to the other side of him, but I was kind of frozen where I stood. I needed to answer him, so this could continue to be just a conversation, and not what I was beginning to feel like. I needed to lighten things up with a joke, or anything to break his stare, but I couldn't think of words, and I really didn't want to hear that voice again. Finally, I toughened up and said, I don't know, dude. What do I look like? A crow expert? They're a bunch of fucking birds, right? Who cares? I felt my body start to tense up again as I prepared myself for his answer. More afraid of hearing that creepy tone again than I was of what he would say. Crow turned his head and popped his neck. I couldn't imagine him having more tension than I did at this moment. Then, with his head towards the ground, he said to me in the same low growl, You should care. If you were smart, you would care about such things. Things that could potentially alert you to danger. Danger, like me. You have no idea what kind of sick shit I'm capable of. I went to prison on a failed attempt at something deliciously horrifying, and have thought of nothing else since but getting another opportunity to finish what I started, and you don't have the sense in you to be afraid. Okay, now he definitely just said that shit. He most likely meant it, but he was wrong in the fact that I didn't have the sense in me to be afraid. I was afraid, and completely aware at this point of the level of danger I was certainly faced with, but I wasn't able to see beyond my ability to reason through the situation. There still existed a part of me that believed I had access to his humanity, and while a very capable monster stirred within him, he seemed more concerned with my inability to see him as only that, which was a thing of greater value. I still saw him desperately wanting to connect, not just in pursuit of someone to victimize, despite what he said. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said calmly, Why would you want to scare me? What am I supposed to be scared of? Your past? I've enjoyed your company, and you seem to be enjoying mine, so why should I expect you to do me any harm? I thought maybe if I got him thinking about how to answer one of those questions, and considering this was still just a conversation, it could afford me a little more time to think my way out of this. Unfortunately, I was wrong. If not entirely, then at least to a fatal degree. Crow's monster was much bigger and far more maniacal than I had assessed, and his hunger for blood was greater than his need to feel accepted, if such a need existed outside my dumb imagination, and it was too late for fight or flight. Crow's enormous hand seemed to wrap around my entire neck, enveloping it completely as he had done with my hand earlier, but instead of instantly crushing it, he applied the slightest amount of pressure, just enough to hold my head in place as he stared directly into my eyes. I could see his now. They were cold, feral eyes, without a trace of white around them. Completely black, as if they were all pupils, and completely dilated, like an animal advancing on its prey. He pressed his body against mine almost affectionately, grasping my arm with one hand, the other still wrapped around my throat, with the beat of my pulse quickening against his palm. He turned his head and put his mouth right up to my ear and whispered, "I have enjoyed you." He paused and started towards my other ear, staring into my eyes as he passed them slowly. I started to hear this low, rumbling sound, and as he pressed his lips to my other ear, I could tell the sound came from inside his throat. It was a growl, and this time when he spoke, it was not a whisper, but instead it was that deep, horrifying voice again, and it rattled my eardrums. "I've enjoyed the thought of watching the life fade from your eyes, Boo." I felt his hand start to tighten around my neck, and I knew I had made the greatest mistake of my life. Staring back into the vacuous darkness of his soulless eyes, that in no way reflected the slightest hint of humanity, I knew I was about to die. Then suddenly, the back door swung open, and there stood the bartender, holding a long, blunt object of some sort. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she yelled. He had instantly released me when the door opened, but it took the sound of my friend's voice for me to react. I shoved him with enough force to knock him off his feet. My car broke his fall, and I hurried through the door. She locked it behind us and ordered me to go lock the front door as well, which I did without hesitation. We were the only ones in the bar at this point, and without cameras outside, there was no way of telling when he finally left. We kept the doors locked until a group finally showed up. We never called the police. I felt too stupid for allowing myself to be in that position in the first place. At the end of the night, some of my guy friends stayed to see us out of the bar safely. I fought back tears as I thanked my friend for coming out when she did, and I brushed it off as being extremely awkward. I didn't want to say how scared I was, or how certain I was of his intent. She was easily half my size, but she definitely saved my life that night. Since that night, I try to be more aware of my own motivation to oblige someone. I never want to put myself in a potentially dangerous situation to avoid offending someone, because that would be the most ridiculous cause to give your life up for, in my opinion. As I continue to meet new people, I still try to treat everyone as an individual, as I always have, but I don't need to be the social savior for those who make everyone else around them feel uncomfortable. That feeling we get about strangers sometimes is our animal instinct to recognize a predator after all. And even if we can't put a reason to it or explain ourselves, sometimes you have to just kick rocks and assess or explain as needed later from a safe distance.